Hey, this is Dr. Syed Haider with the Dr. Haider Show. I have a great guest today, attorney Thomas Renz. I've met him in person. He's a straight shooter. He's also the lead attorney in several major cases brought in Ohio, New Mexico, Maine, and nationally against the CDC, the Department of Health and Human Services, President Biden, and Fauci regarding forced vaccine mandates, big tech ownership or censorship, sorry, the COVID 19 lockdowns, hospital murders, mask mandates, business closures, false PCR data, fraudulent death numbers, and more. He works with and represents America's frontline doctors and Make Americans Free Again. His websites are renzlaw.com, and which is renz-law.com, and holdthemaccountable.com. And I'll put those up on the screen in just a minute. But without further ado, I'd like to welcome Thomas Renz. Thanks for being with us today.
Glad to be here. It's nice to see you again, Doc.
Yeah, nice to see you too. So before we jump into it, how have you been since I saw you? I think it was in San Diego, right?
I
How have you
think
been
that's the
doing?
last time. Oh, busy,
Yeah.
busy, busy. The thing about this is that the people that are promoting, the jabs, the COVID narrative, all this stuff, they can't stop, right? They're all in. When the truth comes out about this, and I say when, not if, the reality is at that point there's going to be a demand for accountability that just it's going to have to be heard, and it it's not going to be good for the people who lied, who put millions of lives at risk, who potentially will end up killing millions. So it's going to be a disaster, and they've just got to keep fighting. So they're keeping me busy, but I think we're making great progress.
Wonderful. So, I haven't had a lot of time to look into this whole monkeypox situation. I have seen some really interesting articles. I didn't have a chance to like confirm them, but one of them was really shocking to me. And an apparent, what it claimed was that there had been a tabletop exercise on monkeypox. One of only like a handful of such exercises in the last decades. The other one was another one was Event 201 a few months before the COVID-19 pandemic struck, and that was a coronavirus tabletop exercise. But apparently there was a monkeypox exercise about a year ago. And at that time, they were doing this kind of like simulation of a monkeypox pandemic that was going to strike in the second week of May 2022. Is that right? I mean, have you looked into this?
So I know that they ran the tabletop, and I've seen but haven't confirmed personally that the dates lined up.
Hmm.
Now I'll tell you something that's really interesting. So my understanding about this is that they had done this on the basis that someone had unleashed a new strain of monkeypox as a bioterror thing.
Hmm.
Well, so here's where my homework's been on this, right? So we look at the jabs and what do they do, and we know that they do damage to the immune system. McCullough just put out a great paper on specifically some potential impacts on your interferon levels, and those interferon levels, and you're the doctor, so you tell me if I got it wrong, but those interferon levels will have an impact on the ability for you to contract or not contract
Hmm.
monkeypox.
Right.
So there's that. Now, so I just put this on a Substack, right? And I also brought out the paper where they talked about the gain of function research that they had done on monkeypox. Now, monkeypox is normally not very transmissible and not really just any sort of a major deal. It's been around since the 50s and nobody's cared. The question to ask ourselves is, why do they care? Why would they run a tabletop exercise? Why would they run an exercise where they're talking about this being a modified version, right? And isn't there some irony that they did that while they're doing their own gain of function research on monkeypox? And while that gain of function research, we also have this vax going out here. So there's monkeypox normally not a big deal, but now the question is, could it be a big deal given how many people have had this jab? Given the fact that they've done another lab leak. What's going on here? So I think it's really a terrifying scenario.
I agree. The strange thing about it is that it's been around, for at least for decades, as far as I know. Again, I haven't looked deeply into monkeypox, but it's been in Africa for forever, and it doesn't really spread very fast. And then suddenly, overnight, you find it in 10 different countries, and within months of Bill Gates talking about smallpox, which is from the same family, possibly being a threat. Um, and I agree with you and what Dr. McCullough is being, publishing, and what a lot of people are saying about, vaccine acquired immunodeficiency syndrome being a really big issue for patients who have had the vaccines. At this point, the last I checked, it was 5 billion human beings, out of 7+ billion on the planet who had had some form or another of a COVID vaccine. And a lot of them may have, or maybe all of them may have impaired immune systems. So you don't even need to, turn it into a bioweapon. But still, like we've seen with the COVID pandemic, you have all these variants coming out, right? Every few months, there's another variant, which, just looking at the progression of them and the way that they spread, I mean, it's very unusual for a natural pandemic. So I'm also worried that you might see variants of this, in the future, spreading. But so looking at kind of like the totality of the situation, what do you think is really going on behind the scenes? I mean, is this something that's being released on the human population? Is there some reason behind it? I mean, what would be the reason?
Well, I mean, we've seen and heard discussions, about the use of planned pandemics, controlled pandemics, things like that. I mean, look at what they've done with SARS-CoV-2. They were able to really damage freedom, damage economy. We just heard here about 2 days ago over in Davos, one of the scumbags over there was talking about COVID as being the most profitable event in human history. Well, maybe if you were one of the billionaires who was, raping the money from the people who were, losing it, but for the real people, the American people who their small businesses were destroyed, their jobs were lost, it was certainly not profitable for them, but it was without a doubt the single biggest wealth transfer in human history. And that's ongoing because of Biden's policies. But you got to ask yourself, if something's making that much money, why wouldn't someone want it to happen again? We know that they're continuing to do this gain of function research. We know that everything about COVID-19 was corrupt. I mean, you saved how many people, and for this untreatable disease by using basic treatments that are available, right? That could have
Yeah.
saved everybody. So you kind of look at all of this, and if you're not feeling a little bit suspicious, well, then hey, I got a bridge to sell you.
Right. Yeah, it does seem very suspicious. And I just was reading. Actually, I just interviewed Peter McCullough and his co-author. I forget his name. Leak, I think his last name was. And they were telling me that Fauci and Gates got together like a few years ago, and they were basically planning how to make money. In the case of a pandemic. So Gavi and the Vaccine Alliance and Gates and Fauci, and so like they're all kind of colluding behind the scenes on how we could make money creating vaccines. In the case of a pandemic, one of the interesting things is looking back over the last 100 years, right, the 20th century, there have been all kinds of pandemic or epidemics. Maybe not pandemics, but there have been all kinds of diseases that have sprouted up and spread and then died away, and they haven't caused this kind of like panic in human
No.
populations. um, and it appears to me that it's the media that's generating the panic. I mean, we have a corrupt, the entire system is corrupt. Everyone kind of plays well together, to the detriment of most of humanity. What do you think about that?
Oh, absolutely. So we've got tons of evidence on that, right? So you can go back to, I think, the single greatest demonstration of the fact that they were aware and absolutely planned this was if you go back to 2003 or 4, a guy who was a communications director, one of the communications directors at the CDC, did an industry trade group presentation. And within that presentation, I've got the slides and I've submitted it to court in a couple of cases. He included the recipe for success in terms of selling vaccines, right? And it was all about fear and sowing fear. He specifically said to this trade group, we've got to push this with the media to scare the hell out of the population. He talked about showing people dying, showing this, messing with the statistics. And then if you look even further back, you can look at public health as an entity. I mean, so going back to the, I want to say 60s, 70s, but I know in the 80s for sure, public health really started studying and working on the idea of the use of fear as a tactic to promote public health, right?
Right.
Scare the public into action. And the problem is that the public by and large doesn't care when you, the public health professional, come out and say, you have to do this to stay healthy. So, most people just don't do anything about it. So they haven't been able to, hey, you need to get this new medicine or this new jab to stay healthy. Well, that's never worked. But they found that fear does work. And fear, when tied in with other things, and we researched the heck out of this for some of my cases. So I'm not, obviously not a psychologist, but I can certainly talk about this. But they found that the use of fear was incredibly effective. And they also found that the use of fear when coupled with social pressure was mind-blowingly effective. It's one of the most effective techniques out there for manipulating people. When you scare everybody and then you get everybody to peer pressure each other into doing things, that's just a powerful technique for manipulating the public. So what do? Well, I can tell you what they do because we've got the documents. The CDC publish crisis communications manuals and all these sorts of things, and they talk about it. Basically, I'll use Ohio as an example. They said, well, you want to have a single source of information going to the public in a crisis, a public health crisis. And that source really needs to come off as trusted and wizened and all these things. So in Ohio, when they started the lockdowns, every day we had the fireside chat with crooked Governor Mike DeWine, where he sat up there and tried to sound all stately and wise and fed us a whole bunch of lies about what's going on with COVID. They knew they were lies, but they used it very effectively. He used all the right buzzwords. He had the right people around him. The set that they used was something that was meant to be comforting to people. So they're talking about the terror, but positioning themselves in the mind of the public to be the solution. They have absolutely mastered with COVID this use of fear and social pressure to get compliance, and it worked. I mean, how many idiots ran around with I still see people with masks on. I mean, the masks that have never done anything to stop viral transmission of anything, but they're
Yeah.
still doing it.
So you said that he got up there and he was spreading lies, basically, right?
Yeah.
So what proof do you have that the government, in this case, and then perhaps at the CDC and the FDA, do you have any proof showing that they knew they were lying, that they were deliberately spreading mistruths?
How many hours do you got?
Right.
Yeah. So let me give you. So I put out a month or two ago, some of the most, I guess, the easiest evidence to understand
Hmm.
in terms of, here's a lie, right? And it's an evidentiary packet. It's still on my website. I think I got it pinned to the top of my Truth Social or Getter or something. I mean, it's out there. You can find it. And in this, what I did was I took several documents that were government or other documents,
Hmm.
and I put bullet point summaries in front of them and cited to the right pages. Right. I think if you scroll down, you'll see it there. You probably have to scroll down a little further. A little further. I think it's after articles. Right there. Up a little bit. One more up. One more up right there. Special notice.
This one, yeah.
Yep. You go there, you can download the document. It's there. If you scroll down to the bottom, it's embedded into this page. There it is. So it's a long document, but if you scroll to page 3, I believe, or 4, what you'll find is a table of contents. And right there it is. And if you see right at the top of that table of contents, you'll see evidence, and then you'll see overview of Project
Mm.
Salus,
Yep.
overview of FDA, yeah, of these different things. Those overview documents are bullet points with sites, so you can look at the following document, which is a government document. So, for example, Project Salus is a great example of what you're asking me, right? So, Project Salus was a DoD project, DoD using this Joint Artificial Intelligence Center to, and there you have it, the bullet points, right? So they, in conjunction with Joint Artificial Intelligence Centers, Umetrics, a couple places, they put out this project, right? And the project was to data mine and find out how safe or effective or dangerous the vaccines are. Now, mind you, this isn't public. So we get this document, and it was a weekly report. And this document was, I believe, dated around the end of September of 2021. At the end of September of 2021, I have several things that I've cited in various places where Fauci is out there saying this is a crisis to the unvaxxed. It's 99% of the people in the hospital are unvaxxed. The hospitals are overflowing with unvaxxed. If you're not vaxxed, you're dying, so on and so forth, right? Well, I've got this document, which Fauci had, and this
So
document,
are you sure Fauci had access to it?
it was a joint project, and it was one of the sources that has been mentioned. Whether he read it or not, I don't know, but yes, it was available to him.
I see.
Is the short answer. I mean, I can't say that he did his homework, but he's
Right.
out there saying that the hospitals are full. Well, so I make this public, right? And in this document, it says 71% of new cases are in fully vaxxed, and
Wow.
60% of hospitalizations are in fully vaxxed, according to this government source.
Hmm.
Well, all of a sudden, within a week, you hear, well, the vaccine's not really blocking transmission, but it was never meant to, right? Do you remember when there was that abrupt change?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was right
Yep.
after I made this document public.
Wow. Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and this document also has a bunch of other good things in there that are, really interesting. Talks about the waning effectiveness. It's never as effective in minority populations for some reason.
Hmm.
They talk about the fact that for the first 14 days post full inoculation, you're not considered vaccinated for vaccine injuries. So if you go get a jab, walk out of the hospital or doctor's office and drop dead, that's not a vaccine injury because it happened too quick. Right. So there's a bunch of good stuff in there, but that's one of the very good examples of them lying. I mean, we've got the verb pack document. They keep saying, "Well, we have no evidence of vaccine injuries. We don't see it." Well, except for the verb pack document tells you exactly what you're looking for, and exactly what they're looking for, and where they're looking for it. The verb pack being the vaccine related biological committee. We've got the Pfizer
Did
doc.
Sorry,
Yeah.
before you go ahead, tell us a little bit more about VerPack and the information that they have.
Well, so that's the group that's looking at these jabs and making recommendations to the CDC or FDA about whether or not they're what to do with it. Approve it, don't
Hmm.
approve it. This, that, and
Hmm.
other. Well, back in October of 2020, I believe, is the date of that presentation. A presentation from one of their meetings was leaked. Now, remember, they've been telling us since the jabs were a thing that the only side effects were a sore arm, cold flu symptoms, and in very, very rare cases, it could cause anaphylaxis, but that's really unlikely. Well, here's the thing. The VerBPAC document in October, before these were released, said that they were looking for a specific list of side effects. And there was a whole list of them. And there was a heck of a lot more than cold and flu symptoms, right? So it gave a full list. It also listed a whole slew of databases that they were going to use to data mine to get these injuries and side effects and other such things. So they knew these things. They knew to look for them. But still, despite the fact that these were the side effects they were expecting, they didn't list them. There was no informed consent. There's another big government lie for you. Y'all thought you were given informed consent. No one's given informed consent because they've lied. Now people will bring up the Pfizer document, which is also in there, and the 9 pages of side effects there. Well, what they did was they said that those aren't side effects. Those 9 pages are adverse events of special interest, right? So you say, Tom, what's the difference between an adverse event of special interest and a side effect? And I say, that's a great question. And that's my answer, because I don't know. There is no difference. They're listed as adverse events of special interest because they have some expectation that they could occur as a result of taking this jab. Well, how is that not a side effect?
Right. So my understanding is those 9 pages were actually reported to them. They weren't like what they were looking for, but they had actually been reported.
I don't know that for sure. So when they authorize this, here's why I don't know if that's right or not, and here's why I say that. When they authorize this, the phase 1, phase 2 trials only included a couple hundred people. I mean, they authorized this based on studies that were just a couple hundred people. The initial
I,
EUA.
okay, so I thought we had 40,000 people, for example, in the Pfizer
Oh no,
trial in
oh no,
each.
no.
Right.
So the phase 1, phase 2 on the BNT 162, whatever, in the Pfizer documents, and I've got the document, I can show you, a couple hundred people. Now, there were 40,000 people in various other parts of this, but the phase 1, phase 2, I got the document specifically shows it. This was, now that 40,000 number, that came in on afterwards. Okay, so the 40,000 number is from the Pfizer document that had that long list of side effects. And that was the post-authorization follow-up study that they had to do. So that study only covered till the end of February 2021. So basically about 2.5 months of availability. And at that point, we already had, was it 1,200 deaths, 40-some thousand people with serious events and all these other things, including, a lot of these adverse events of special interest that were, there. Now, that
I
list.
just have one question about this before you. Sorry to interrupt, but um, were the 1,200 deaths reported in the follow-up trial participants? Like that was part of the trial, or was it just like random deaths from around the world after
Uh,
they rolled out the vaccine?
they weren't. No, they were deaths. It appeared that they were part of the reporting that Pfizer decided that they were related to the vaccine. Is my understanding of their document, right?
Hmm.
So what you've got is the initial studies were a couple hundred people, and that's the phase 1, phase 2, and that's what the emergency use authorization was based on. Then you have the
Wow.
follow-up document where you have a whole bunch more people who are in the trial, and you see and how many that is. I don't know, but then you've got all these side effects that were reported with it, and that's where they give that full list of adverse events of special interest. But I don't believe that they would have given that full list unless, I don't think that would have been on the, just in that first couple months. I think that full list was based on, probably composition of what's going in this. I mean, it's hard to say because one thing that they are not is transparent. And I've combed over every document I can find on this, and some of it's just unclear what they knew and when they knew it.
So do you know, this is a question I've had for a while. So a judge ordered them to release like all the data, whatever that means. So who gets to decide what gets blacked out and doesn't get released?
Huh. So what happened is there was a Freedom of Information Act request. And what they asked for, I believe, was the data that the FDA used to determine, approval authorization of these drugs. So the FDA then, under the FOIA law, would, have to release this. The FDA tried to fight it. The judge said, sorry, you lose. So they have to release it all. Some of the information is not going to be public, or be able to be made public, right? So personally identifiable information, you couldn't make that
Mhm.
public, right? Because that's barred under the law. So there's some things like that that are barred. Uh, Theoretically, for them to black anything out, there has to be a basis under the law to do so. Now, you know for sure they're going to black out as much as they possibly can, and some of it's going to be done probably in bad faith, but they're going to say, well, we just made a mistake, unless someone questions them, they're not going to undo that mistake. So the decision's kind of being made. It's the fox guarding the hen house, the people who are going through this. But this is one of the really fundamental issues we're facing. From the beginning, we've got the government telling us what's going on. They're giving us information. They're giving us all this stuff. But the they're the crooks. They're the ones who are
Yeah,
behind this. So the courts
exactly.
are struggling a bit because normally the courts go to the government for free and fair and independent information. Well, here, everything the government says is a lie. So what we're saying to the courts in a lot of cases is, guys, we're telling you these guys are liars. Why are you deferring to their judgment? We're telling you they're corrupt. Why are you deferring to their judgment? They say, well, that's what we always do. Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't make sense here. So there's a lot of issues with that we're dealing with in the courts. I mean, and nowhere has that been better exemplified than in the Supreme Court on the OSHA case, where you heard Sotomayor spewing all these garbage statistics. She probably believed them because they came from trusted sources, right? The CDC. And does anybody really think that Sotomayor is the kind that's going to question anything from big government? I mean, that's just not, that's just not her nature as a jurist. She tends to believe whatever the government has to say.
Yeah, this has been a problem. Also, I think in cases where people are like parents are trying to prevent their partner from, vaccinating their child, and the judge basically um, says that, okay, we take this as the truth that, the vaccines are safe and effective, right? Like you can't really bring somebody to argue against that. Is that the case in courtrooms right now, where you can't really bring an expert to argue that they are not safe and effective, or that they may be, maybe the risks outweigh the benefits in a certain age group?
Well, you can. I mean, under the rules of evidence, I mean, if the state asserts something or someone asserts something, it becomes a rebuttable presumption, and
Mm,
you can argue that stuff. But the problem is ultimately, when you go to court, you're asking a judge or a jury to make some decisions, and they're judgment calls, right? I mean,
yeah.
we've got rules for the way that we're supposed to weigh this evidence and look at it and this, that, and the other. But ultimately, what you have on one side are the trusted professionals from the CDC, and on the other side, you got, oh, that crazy doctor over there, right? And
Yeah.
that's how they've set this up. They've abused their power and authority to an extent that's just mind blowing, and it has made it very difficult. Now, it's not insurmountable. Luckily, they've made so many mistakes that yes, you can get around it. You can show that they're not credible by showing how many times they've lied, for example. Oh, it's safe and effective. Well, why'd I have this government document that shows that it's not? Why do I have this government document? Why do I have this Pfizer document that shows that it's not? So, but the problem is if you're a lucky guy, you probably haven't spent much time with lawyers. Lawyers, uh, well, there's a joke in law school. If I could do math, I'd be an engineer. If I could do science, I'd be a doctor. I can't do anything, so I'm a lawyer, right? Um, Science, this especially this kind of deep and complex science that we're dealing with on this stuff, is generally something that is just not lawyer friendly. A lot of lawyers are just
Mm,
not okay with it. I can't tell you how many times we have to. Well, and for me, and some of the books are out right now, but this half of the shelf, it's all public health related, science related. I mean, I just had to spend an immense amount of time on this to learn this stuff so that I could talk about it in a functional way. that's not a common
Mm.
thing for lawyers to do. Um, so I mean, it's just not that's why you're having so much trouble, because making these arguments in the courts require
Mhm.
you to have the ability. You're a corrupt government bought off doctor who's pro-vaccine, and this is actually an example from a case that I'm involved with, right? The government has their expert witness doctor, college professor, very credible, all these papers on the wall, very brilliant guy, at least that's what they tell me. So their expert witness writes an expert testimony. In his expert testimony, he completely, and mind you, he's not only a doctor, but also has a master's in public health. He completely mischaracterizes a number of study types and study structures. He's talking about cohort studies that, in ways that are just not applicable. He's talking about this, the only good study is a triple blind, triple blind
Like randomized control.
randomized control trial. And, there is nothing good. Meta-analysis apparently means nothing, all these different
Mhm.
things, right? And so the lawyers who were heading up that case send it over, and I'm looking at it. And the first thing that I did was I just went through and made 10,000 notes on study structure and all these different things, because he was wrong about all of it.
Mm.
But if you don't know that, you can't cross-examine or depose the witness properly, right?
Mhm.
So it's a tricky thing, because there's 6 lawyers in the universe that know this stuff, and they typically work either for pharma or for the hospitals that are making money off of this. So they're not trying these cases. So, that's kind of been one of my secret sauces, is that I may not be very bright, but I know enough to cause trouble, right? So I'm asking the questions that need to be asked in the ways that they need to be asked. But that's part of my responsibility, if I'm going to take this kind of work, is to know this field well enough that I can do it in an educated way.
Wow, that's fascinating. And you're doing the work. I mean, and you're the only one I know of who's doing it. I mean, I'm so grateful that you're out there and you're fighting this fight. One thing I've been wondering and thinking about, I never really thought about this, or maybe I never even knew it until maybe a month or two ago, that we really don't get the raw data for anything unless you sue a company and force, discovery in a court of law. So what happens, and a lot of people don't realize this, is that, you know, big pharma basically runs studies and they collect all this data, right? And it's all raw data. And then they collate it and they analyze it, and they have their own scientists kind of like basically put together a paper and send it off to the journals. And that paper is actually signed by the lead investigator, usually, of the trial. They oftentimes don't have a say in what's in the paper themselves, but pharma scientists write it up, send it to the journal with the lead investigator's signature on it, and then it's sent off to peer reviewers, and so all they get to see is what pharma decides to shine a light on, or what they choose to take from their own data and present to us. So that's the same issue with the FDA, right? The FDA is presented whatever data Pfizer wanted to show them. Is there any chance of us forcing discovery on all of the data that's available in their files?
Yes. So I've got a bunch of cases going in a bunch of places, and that discovery is one of the most important aspects of this. Um, I'm going to finish answering that, but I'm not really watching the feed too much because I'm focusing on our interview, but I saw someone say something that I just am not going to let go. Someone talked about feeling alone. Ladies and gentlemen, whoever's watching this, trust me when I tell you, you are not alone. There are millions of you. God's given me an opportunity to travel around this country, to talk to people, to be involved with this. You are not alone. In fact, I'd go so far as to say, if we're not the majority, we're very close. You are not. You have to have heart. You have to take heart. You have to take heed. Continue fighting. I promise you, you're not alone. In fact, we just had just yesterday, maybe over in Davos, the CEO of Pfizer was whining. He says, There's plenty of supply. The CEO of Moderna was doing this as well. There's so much supply, but the Americans, they won't take it. They just won't take it. We don't know what to
Mm.
do. The people don't want this. Well, you're right. We don't, because we're not that stupid. You're not alone. But the mission of the media and the mission of these scumbags is to make you feel like a fruitcake, like you're alone, like nobody believes like you do. Trust me, you're not. Trust me, you're not. I thought I was alone for a very long time. Very, very long time. It was tough and very, very lonely when I started this fight, but you're not. So I didn't want that to go by. That's too important, because we, we the people, we stand together. We will win this. Okay. So, but, and I didn't mean to digress, but
Oh,
that's such an
that
important
was really
thing.
important. I agree. Yeah.
Um, as far as the discovery, we got a bunch of trials out there, right? And discovery is such a critical component of this. From the beginning, that's been one of the most important facts or aspects of this. They have fought so hard and so dirty to keep us from getting to discovery on this. It's mind blowing. I don't. None of the lawyers that I work with have ever seen anything like this. And I mean, I got some really experienced people I'm working with now.
What kind of things, for example?
Oh, just the way that they're using motion play and using various types of the rulings we're getting on some of these motions and some of this nonsense. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
So, I mean, is
And
it like the judges themselves are also kind of siding against you and ruling in a way that doesn't
well,
seem to be fair?
so listen, you got to understand something. I have nothing but respect for our court system, but the court is made up of people, right? These judges
Yeah.
are human. And so they've listened to 2 years of lies and fear, just like you and I have. Now, the difference
Mm.
between them and us is they work for the federal government. They look at the CDC as peers, co-workers, other people in a lot of cases. So, I mean, there's a tendency built in for that to be some additional trust there. In addition to that, we had whistleblowers from inside the federal court system who've given us hundreds of pages of documents for whatever sort of fear campaign was going on against the public. Multiply it by 10 for the federal judges. So I don't
Mm.
think that these guys, everybody says to me, do you think the judges are all corrupt? No, I don't think the judges are all corrupt. I do think that they've been fed a line, just like everybody else, but
Yeah.
that's our job to overcome that, and we're going to do that. We have a case right now. We're going to be arguing coming up in the Sixth Circuit. We've got another case that we're going to be appealing to the U.S. Supreme Court. Um, it's just taking time to weave through the courts. I think we're going to get that full discovery, though. We're getting ready to file some more cases. We actually, I thought they would have been filed by now, but there's been some odd twists and turns. You know, there's so much new information coming out all the time. And the other thing I think that's really very important, because I do this, because you're seeing my ugly mug, on this show, on whatever show you see me on, everybody thinks that that means that they know everything I'm doing. I'm an attorney. If you know this much of what I'm doing, I'm impressed, because we can't talk about it. We can't.
Mm.
So, you're a doctor. If you come to me and say, Tom, I've got a complaint against me on my medical license, can you defend me? Well, I can't talk about that publicly.
Right.
I mean, I may get the biggest victory ever, but unless you tell me I can talk about it, I can't talk about that.
Mm.
Nobody's ever going to know we did it. So we've had a lot of things that were successful. We've had a lot of things that we couldn't talk about, but those things that are happening behind the scenes, those things are very, very important. So I'm feeling pretty optimistic about everything that's going on, and that we're going to get where we need to be. But it's just like I said, it's been a painfully slow process, and I hate to think how many people we've lost because of that slowness.
Absolutely. I mean, discovery, I think, is like you said, it's one of the most critical things because, the FDA has been wrong so many times in its history, right? You have so many like horrors that have passed through FDA, and been approved. Like diethylstilbestrol, thalidomide, even Vioxx very recently. And depending on who's counting, I mean, it could be in the tens or hundreds of thousands of Americans that have been affected by some of these drugs. And in the case of vaccines, if they are as bad as a lot of us think that they are, we're talking about millions of people, tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions, and around the world. The number of people who maybe have chronic disease and maybe looking at a lifetime of ill health because of these, is just, I mean, it's staggering. Right? The scale of this thing is, I mean, it's beyond belief almost, right? It's beyond, I mean, it's hard to even comprehend, right? The scale of human suffering that could be attributable to these things.
Yeah, this will go down in history as one of the most horrible events in humanity's existence. It's just, when it's all said and done, it'll be a real race to see whether more people died from this or World War II. And but that's going back to what we said earlier. That's part of the reason these guys won't back down, because we saw what happened to the people who were held accountable in World War II. It's horrible. The interesting thing about this is that people are starting to wake up on a large scale, and part of that is because of how effective we've been in fighting this, right? I'm of the belief that for this vaccine nonsense to have worked, for the plan to have worked, they needed to get to about 95% of the people vaccinated. And the reason for that is this. So we've got all of these health problems popping up all over. I live in a small town. When you live in a small town, there's not a whole lot in the newspaper other than obituaries. You read the local obituaries, you can't go a week without seeing 2 or 3 more 40-year-olds that died peacefully in their sleep for no apparent reason. All of them are jabbed.
Yeah.
And then, you're constantly hearing about your cousin, brother, sister, aunt who has COVID again for the 83rd time. They're jabbed. Your response is, well, I'm fine. And you've never been jabbed.
Yeah.
So, people are living truth, right? And because they're living the truth, you can't, it doesn't matter how much control of the media and what you do to lie, you can't force a lie when people are living the truth. And so that's a real issue for the bad guys, because the worst case for the population is, CDC's talked about maybe 70% of the people having at least one jab. I don't believe the number's that high. I mean, they lie every time they open their mouth. I would say that I'd be surprised if over 50% of our population's vaccinated. And I think that the number boosted is real small. But whatever it is, even if it is 70%, that means out of every 10 people, 3 of them are not jabbed, which means that you're going to see 3 of those people perfectly fine and 7 of them dealing with random horrible side effects, blood clots, cancers, all sorts of things. And at some point, it's going to be real clear, because the people who are not jabbed at this point, they're standing strong. They're not going to get jabbed. It just, if you fought through to this point, you're just not going to do it. Yeah. So, there's going to be a control group that everybody's going to see in their life, and that's going to be a very, very bad thing for the other side.
Definitely. So do you think this whole monkeypox, scare, which is, it really seems kind of ridiculous, but do you think that's part of trying to shift the focus away from these vaccines and also, to, what the World Health Organization is trying to do with the pandemic treaty, trying to, repeated, scares of this kind in order to cement their power around the world?
Well, so there's 2 major things that you asked there, and one is the WHO and the other is the monkeypox. So I think it's hard to say whether the monkeypox is really a false flag type thing or whether they're legitimately concerned. Like I said, normally it wouldn't be something to worry about. Yeah. But given the jabs and the gain of function, who knows, right? The bad guys would know that better than us, because they'd be the ones releasing the gain of function jab on the on people. Yeah. Now, The WHO thing is another story entirely. So the WHO thing is a really interesting thing, and I don't think that that's a distraction. I think that's a power grab. That's setting up for future actions, right?
Hmm.
Um, so everybody's asking about the WHO thing, and I'm talking a lot about that right now because it needs some explaining. So from a legal perspective, I need people to understand it's not as simple as the U.S. has given up its sovereignty. Okay, that is not what it means. Okay, so legally, this is pretty complicated, and I'm going to try and keep it as simple as possible. The Constitution rules, right? In this country, now Biden ignores it, all these people ignore it, but from a legal perspective, you can't change it unless you go through the amendment process, and it is what
Hmm.
it is. Okay. So Biden doesn't have authority to give the WHO power over our Constitution. He just can't do that. And
Hmm.
I don't think there's I just don't even see a way that any Supreme Court, whether you believe whatever you believe about them, could ever rule otherwise. But under the Constitution, the president is in charge of foreign relations. He's the diplomat in chief, right? So what that and diplomatic, treaties, things like that, they have the force of law, right? So a ratified treaty is roughly equivalent in terms of its authority to a federal law, which is not as strong as the Constitution, but actually has supremacy over state laws.
Hmm.
So what Biden's doing is he's creating an administrative agency. He wants there to be a global administrative agency. So think of the IRS, but global. I mean, because we all love the IRS, right? Um, an administrative agency like that. Now, I'm not talking about a money counter, but a global administrative agency. So that agency then has all this autonomy and all this authority to do its thing. Well, the problem is that Biden gets to decide what to do with that. And what he's going to do is he's going to claim that that gives him authority to do this or to do this or to do this through his diplomacy power, his foreign relations power. And that's the dirty secret here, right? So he's going to use that, and then he's going to, it's the only way that he can cede power to an international organization under our Constitution. It's the only way that he can, and it's an indirect, it's a really shady thing. There's no benefit to the United States for doing this. I would argue that it's seditious minus, the use of force requirement and sedition, or treasonous minus the use of force requirement. I mean, this is just plain wrong. He should be impeached for even considering this. But the thing is he's going to do this. He's going to give that authority, and then he's going to claim it, and then he's going to set up for a huge Supreme Court fight. Can I, as the president, who's got this very clear power under the Constitution to deal with foreign relations, have the ability to, through these treaties and these other such things, enforce international, commitments? And so it's different. It's not exactly, you're not going to see little blue helmets running around without, his okay. But would
Hmm.
he give the okay? And that's the real question. And I think the greatest danger, truthfully, is, I mean, with they being the World Economic Forum, all these globalists, all these people, we know, they're working on genetic weapons, genetic this, genetic that. They need data to do that. The number one thing that they need is they need our data. They need our information, our public health information, which, thanks to Obamacare and electronic medical records, is consolidated in one nice spot for the federal government. Well, what I think would happen is, if this goes through, the first thing that's going to happen when the WHO declares their emergency is Biden is going to give them all of this data. Well, once he's given it to the WHO, it's going to China and to all of our enemies, and you aren't getting it back. It's, what are you going to do? Sue them and say you gave our data away, and so now you got to get it back? What do you think China's going to do that? So it's one of those situations where it would be very hard to deal with preemptively. And once he does it, we're screwed. What do you do? So I think that the data aspect of this is one of the biggest first steps and most important first steps that will occur. Um, but I mean, we've got to fight this. I mean, we got to make sure that this is not happening. I mean, we should defund the WHO. We should defund. We should, I mean, we should just pull out of that treaty entirely.
So, from what I've read, are we already part of the treaty? And I mean, what
We're part
can you
of all
explain that?
sorts of treaties related to this, and I mean, I would say that we are. I mean, been certain WHO amendments that we're not a part of, and then there's certain things that we are, and it's a long, convoluted mess.
Hmm.
Short version, in my opinion, is this: they would claim that we are a part of it, and that he's got that authority through that.
So he would be, correct me if I'm wrong here, just so I understand it. Would he be kind of like a middleman? Like the WHO says, okay, everyone in the world needs to do this, and Biden says, okay, I agree with that.
Well, here's the question: does the tail wag the dog?
Yeah.
Um, I don't know, because here's the thing is this. So does a Democrat president who is working in conjunction with the WHO against America, like Joe Biden, except for, I mean, let's be realistic. I call him Biden because Obama's running the show. Biden doesn't even, he's in the corner pooping his pants. He doesn't know where he's at. I've decided to actually officially call him President Poopy Pants, which I should be better than that. You can correct me. But the thing is while he's doing that, if the WHO says you're going to do the following things, did they say it or did he tell them to say it, right? Did they get a note from, by Obama or,
Yeah.
the reality is that the note's not even coming from Obama. The note's coming from the globalists, right? The WHO's
Yeah.
getting influenced by China, by the WEF, by these other organizations. Yeah, the last one that they care about is the United States. I mean, they all hate the United States, right? So, yeah, that's the question. And, I guess, how's that going to work out? Now, remember something I just saw caught out of the corner of my eye, something about the ratification process, right? Yes and no. So let me tell you about treaties. The president can enter into an executive agreement that's not a treaty. Now, it doesn't have as much authority as a treaty. A ratified treaty has the authority of federal law. But the president can enter into an executive agreement with another nation. That happens all the time. It's not uncommon. And plus, some of the treaties historically have been ratified. He's not changing the WHO. He's changing the IHR's, International Health Regulations. Those are a part of the kind of regulatory structure the WHO is promulgating. So he wouldn't need to re-ratify his participation in the WHO or any of this stuff. Arguably, I mean, it's hard to say exactly where they're going to go with this, but the bottom line is wherever they're going to go, it ain't good.
Yeah. So I guess one way of understanding is that the Biden administration is making a move to basically bypass Congress, right? They're the ones who usually
Yes,
create laws in
yes.
of the land, and we're bypassing them in this case. And so we're going to have basically a new law of the land in the way that we run our pandemics. And then you said that this overrules state level law. So all the states need to basically bow down before the federal laws,
If it's
including this one.
anything that would be a ratified treaty, there would be supremacy in the federal law. Yeah. Now, if it's not holding the force of a ratified treaty, then maybe not. But the thing about that is there's a lot of gray area and a lot of arguments to be made. And does anybody listening to this think that it was constitutional to force you to wear a mask or to force you to get an experimental gene therapy drug to keep your job?
No.
If there is any gray room whatsoever in the law, let me assure you they will run with that to the fullest extent possible. It may not be precisely legal, but don't think for a second that they won't do it. I mean, it's just that you're fooling yourself.
Hmm. So, what do you think would happen? I mean, this is coming up for in July or June or July, and what would happen? If the WHO tried to implement these rules on a federal level through the Biden administration on all of the states. I mean, do you think all the states are just going to take this lying down? I mean, what would be the
No,
response?
no, there's going to be lawsuits. Listen, no, here's what I don't think is going to happen. I don't think you're going to wake up and see blue helmets. I don't
Mm,
think that's even close. They're not going to give up sovereignty in their entirety. What they're going to do is it's going to be systematic, right? I mean, if you're following what the WEF and Klaus Schwab and crew are talking about, they're talking about 2030, not 2023. So, over the next 7 to 10 years, what are they going to do? They're just going to keep beating up and chipping away. So this is another step in the wrong direction. Is this going to suddenly make America, part of a globalist cabal? No, not at all. Is it going to move us farther in that direction? Yes, it will. How much farther? I don't know. There'll be lawsuits, there'll be all sorts of things, and we'll have to see. Typically, when there's a big constitutional question, the way to look at it is the law moves this far, right? What the Democrats, well, and the globalists, the leftists, the American enemies have done over the last 2.5 years is they've kept doing things where instead of moving it this far, they've moved it this far. Okay, so normally when it's moved this far and you take a lawsuit, your lawsuit moves it back maybe that much, and you end up pretty close to where you were. In this case, if you move it that much, you're only that much closer, but you still move that far away. So, what they've done is they've just gone completely off the deep end, doing ththings that nobody thought were acceptable
yeah.
and that are just way out there, but they're going to keep pressing that because that's how they have to keep, that's what they have to do. We're going to step this far and then we'll give you this much back. Well, that from a lawyer's perspective, that's kind of what's been happening. And, it's going to take some serious effort. And I'm going to be honest with you. The people watching this, the people listening to this, we the people, we're the ones that are going to win this. It doesn't matter what I do in the courts, that can have a big impact. But victory comes if we stand and we stand together. We've got to have people involved. We've got to have them active. We've got to make sure that we get good people elected. It can't be done. Yeah, I'm just some guy from a little town in Ohio. I'm fighting like hell, but it's got to be we the people that win this. So that I hope that the people listening and watching will be involved and active and fighting.
Yeah, so that's a great way to wrap up. I mean, we just have like a few seconds, but if you have, a minute or two, just send us away however you'd like. Tell us a little bit about how people can join the fight and what, kind of volunteer opportunities there are and how people can donate to help you. I know there's not a lot of money in fighting the good fight, even as a lawyer.
No, there certainly is not. Money's always scarce, and the more money I get, I've put a lot of my personal money into this, and will continue to do so. And you see the Substack there. Substack, almost everything I do is free. If you decide to pay for it, that money goes into the fight. The Give, Send, Go goes into the fight. Anything that we get, it's to fight. So we appreciate it. You can go to Renz-Law, RENZ-law.com. We're on Truth Social at Tom Renz. We're on Getter, Cloud Hub. But we really, really, really need to make sure that we're sharing the word. We try and put up videos and put up stuff on Renz-Law.com regularly. And we got to fight. We got to educate people. We got to let them know what's going on. And we just got to take a stand. You got to have the courage. This is our kids' future. I got 2 little boys. Got to fight.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. So does this donation link work? Is that going to the right place?
That one goes
It
to
look,
the charity. You see the Give, Send, Go there right on the left?
Ah, I see. Okay, here we
That
go.
one goes to
Makes sense.
me. We've got a charity that I started that we're associated with. But it's a charity. That's if you want to help with the fight, the give send goes the way to go. Or subscribing to the Substack.
Here we go. Okay. All right, great. Thank you so much for taking the time to, explain all of this. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. I've been part of this for a couple of years now, and there's so many things that I don't know. I mean, there's just so much to look through and to understand and to read through. I mean, the documents, the trials, it's just there's so much there. And so, I'm just so grateful that you're doing this work, and
Thousands
it's
of pages a month, brother. It's a fight,
Yeah.
but
Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope to have you back soon. And I'd love to talk to you again. I mean, it's one of the most important things. I mean, I would just tell everyone, go and donate whatever you can. And I'm going to donate today, because I think this is the fight that we need to fight. We need to take it to the courts, and we need to take it, as far as the Supreme Court, hopefully, on some of these really important cases.
we're trying. We're going to fight as long as we can. I really appreciate it. I'd love to come back.
All right, great. Thanks again.